Bet your dad bought that beret off eBay just to look important. The words hit like gravel against glass. Cadet Trevor Hensley didn't lower his voice. He made sure the others around the bleachers heard him. A few chuckled. One elbowed another. Ryan Callahan didn't answer. He just clutched the faded green beret tighter in his lap. The fabric, frayed at the edges, still smelled faintly of smoke and leather, like his dad's old locker. The Colorado sun beat down on the polished concrete of the Academy's parade grounds. Flags snapped above, proud and indifferent. Trevor leaned in, mock sincere. Did he even serve, or was that just some bedtime story? No one stopped him. No one spoke. A captain approached with a clipboard, glanced down, then said flatly, "You're not in uniform, son. Guests must stay beyond the observation line." Ryan stood slowly, wordless. He walked alone, past rows of cadets who wouldn't meet his eyes, gripping the beret like it might vanish. Trevor laughed once more. Guess they figured out the truth. The microphone crackled. The ceremony was about to begin. If you believe no one should be treated this way, type the word honor below. Your voice matters more than you think. Ryan stood behind the white line marking the visitors' zone, surrounded by scattered groups of parents and siblings, but none of them stood near him. While the opening remarks echoed from the main stage of the Boulder Military Preparatory Academy, he remained upright, posture straight, holding the green beret tightly against his chest. He wasn't in uniform. He wasn't part of the ceremony, but he stood like a cadet. The fabric of the beret felt rough and warm in his palm. Worn down over years, the edge frayed, the patch slightly faded. It had belonged to his father, Staff Sergeant James Callahan, who never returned from his final deployment in Kandahar. Ryan still remembered the knock on the door, the silence afterward, the box they handed him with folded flags and unspeakable weight. And now, this was what remained, a field full of ceremony, a name not called. Cadets marched in formation, called one by one to the platform. Each was recognized alongside a service member, a parent still active or long past. Photos flashed across the large screen. Applause followed each one. Ryan didn't blink. He waited. The name never came. No one called Callahan. He had submitted the documents. He'd included everything. DD-214, service photo, even a scanned letter from his father's commanding officer. It was supposed to be enough, but the master of ceremonies skipped to the next slide. Then another. Then another. Ryan's fingers tightened around the beret. Across the field, Trevor Hensley leaned on a training baton, loud enough for his voice to carry. "Guess fake stories don't make the cut, huh?" Some of the cadets near him snickered. One turned away, shaking his head. Another pretended not to hear. Ryan didn't move, didn't flinch, but the silence around him thickened. Two younger cadets walked by, giving him a side glance, like he didn't belong. A woman nearby, holding a program, subtly stepped away, clutching her purse tighter as if guarding something. Then came the words that twisted deeper. A junior officer on stage announced flatly, "For any family members not listed today, we regret that some service records could not be verified in time." Ryan heard the breath catch in his own chest. That wasn't an oversight. It was an erasure. Behind him, Trevor's voice cut through the crowd again. "Some legacies aren't real. Just stories kids tell themselves." Ryan stayed rooted. He could feel the heat rising off the cracked concrete beneath his shoes. The flags above waved, perfect, impersonal. The sun gleamed against polished boots and mirrored sunglasses, and yet no one turned. No one corrected Trevor. No one asked if Ryan was okay. He closed his eyes for a second, breathed in the sharp mix of sweat, dust, and ceremonial polish. When he opened them again, his gaze lifted beyond the parade ground, toward the mountains in the distance, toward the sky where his father's name still lived. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But the green beret remained in his hands, held not like cloth, but like a truth no one else could carry. The ceremony moved forward, unbothered. Trumpets played, medals glinted. Names rang out across the wide concrete field with reverence and pride. The families of the honored stood to take photos, some clutching folded flags or shadow boxes. A boy with braces held up a framed photo of his mother, a Navy medic. The crowd clapped softly. Ryan stood still. No camera flashes came from his corner. He glanced down. The edge of the beret was unraveling, a single thread coming loose near the patch. He smoothed it with his thumb, his breathing steady, his expression unreadable. He had practiced this, not folding under the eyes of others, not showing the heat under his collar or the burn behind his eyes. The silence around him wasn't quiet. It was loaded. He caught fragments of nearby whispers. He wasn't on the program list. I don't think his dad was even a soldier. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. Ryan had written the biography himself, 27 lines, each carefully checked. Sergeant James Callahan, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, KIA, Kandahar Province. There was no misunderstanding, only dismissal. From across the field, Cadet Trevor Hensley stood beside a group of upperclassmen. He pointed discreetly toward Ryan, shaking his head with mock pity. See what happens when you make stuff up? Embarrassing. None of the others laughed out loud this time, but no one stopped him either. Ryan's jaw clenched, not in rage, but to keep everything else from spilling out. The beret in his hands felt heavier now, like it carried not only memory, but shame someone else had tried to attach to it. A staff sergeant passed nearby with a clipboard and stopped. He glanced at Ryan, then at the clipboard, frowning. Name. Callahan. Ryan Callahan, Ryan answered, quietly but clearly. The sergeant flipped a page, skimmed, then shook his head. I don't see that listed. You'll need to stay back here with the non-affiliated guests. Non-affiliated. His fingers closed around the beret until his knuckles whitened. Just behind the staging tent, a low murmur rolled through the ranks. It wasn't official. It was cadet speak, half rumor, half verdict, and it was moving fast. That kid? Yeah. His dad probably bailed or lied. Probably trying to get attention. You know how these people are. Ryan heard it. They weren't whispering for secrecy. They whispered because they didn't believe he mattered enough to hear. The sound of boots echoed across the concrete as the next row of cadets was called forward. Ryan remained in place, unmoving. One of the academy's photographers lifted her camera toward the stands. As she panned across the crowd, she paused on Ryan for a moment, then moved on. No photo, no story. Ryan adjusted the boonie hat slightly, resting it once again on his lap. In the sun, its green fabric looked almost black. He thought of his father's voice, calm, measured. If you ever feel alone in a room full of uniforms, son, stand taller. So Ryan did, even as a shadow fell across him. The next name echoed from the loudspeakers. Applause followed. The sun climbed higher, washing the field in harsh light. Ryan didn't move. From the far edge of the platform, a group of dignitaries rose from their seats and headed inside the administrative building. A brief lull fell over the crowd. It was in that pause, that shallow breath between ceremony and silence, that Ryan stepped forward. No one called him. No one noticed at first. He simply started walking. Not quickly, not defiantly, just steadily, like the moment had been waiting for him all along. Across the cracked concrete parade ground between rows of seated cadets, his figure moved like a shadow. Eyes followed him now, not in recognition, but confusion. Whispers rose. A few turned their heads. Others simply watched, unsure. He walked straight to the memorial stone, a waist-high block of granite near the reviewing stand. Etched across its surface were the names of alumni lost in combat. The base was covered with wreaths, medals, small notes, flags. Ryan stopped. He lowered the green beret with both hands, slowly, deliberately. Then, he knelt, one knee down on the warm concrete, the other supporting him as he leaned forward and placed the beret at the foot of the stone. He didn't look around, didn't speak. His fingers smoothed the fabric gently once. Then he stood. He raised his right hand in salute. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it held. No camera flashed, no one clapped, No voice over the loudspeaker acknowledged what had just happened. But a silence settled around the field that hadn't been there before. Not the silence of disinterest, the kind that lets injustice pass. This was different. The cadets in the front row shifted in their seats. One of the drill instructors straightened without knowing why. A hand lowered a phone. Ryan lowered his salute and stepped back from the memorial. The beret stayed, alone, centered, unmoving. Like a statement only the stone could read. He didn't return to his seat. He didn't need to. He just stood, tall, quiet, still, as if waiting for something none of them had realized was already happening. A full 30 seconds passed. No one moved. No one spoke. Ryan stood near the memorial, hands at his sides, the spot where he had left the beret now drawing every glance. Then came the sound that changed everything. Not a voice. Not a shout. Just the unmistakable, steady thump of military boots on concrete. From the far end of the field, a single man walked forward with deliberate weight. He wore full dress blues. Silver oak leaves shimmered near his collar. Medals adorned his chest like pieces of silence hammered into steel. General Clayton Rhodes. The name alone carried weight. Former commander of the 173rd Airborne. Decorated in 3 theaters. Retired, but never forgotten. He had arrived quietly. No one expected him to take part. But now, he was moving. Straight toward the memorial. Straight toward Ryan. Every cadet turned. Trevor Hensley paled slightly. The general's pace never changed. Slow. Intentional. Like he had walked this exact path in his mind 100 times before. When he reached Ryan, he stopped 3 feet in front of him. The two of them stood still, a boy in jeans and scuffed boots, a general in a uniform that had seen more war than most textbooks would ever mention. Then, without a word, General Rhodes brought his heels together and saluted. A full, perfect regulation salute, the kind you give to a flag, or to the memory of someone whose name deserves never to be forgotten. Ryan returned it, slower, unsure, but steady. When their hands dropped, the general spoke, not loudly, but clearly enough that every corner of the parade ground could hear. Staff Sergeant James Callahan trained leaders, and he raised one. Whispers stirred in the crowd, but no one dared interrupt. The general reached to his chest. His hand moved with the care of a man touching something sacred. He unfastened a medal, the Distinguished Service Cross. Its ribbon faded slightly from time. He stepped forward and placed it into Ryan's hand. Ryan looked up, stunned. His fingers curled instinctively around the medal, feeling the smooth weight of it, like honor made real. "This belonged to me," the general said quietly, "just for Ryan. But it was never mine alone." Trevor Hensley stood frozen among the cadets. The bravado drained from his face. He didn't speak. A few cadets straightened. Some removed their caps. One by one, without command, they began to rise. No orders, just understanding. A drill instructor near the stage snapped to attention. Even the photographer, who had ignored Ryan before, now raised her lens. Not for a portrait, for a moment. And that moment wasn't about medals or names. It was about witnessing something they all should have seen sooner. General Rhodes turned to the reviewing stand. "Make the correction," he said plainly. The academy director, a woman with 4 rows of service ribbons and steel in her spine, nodded once. "It'll be done." As the general stepped aside, Ryan stood alone again, but not unseen. If you believe dignity always finds its voice, even in silence, subscribe now. It's how we remember what must never be forgotten. The next morning, a plaque appeared at the base of the memorial. It wasn't announced. It wasn't part of the ceremony. But there it was, new brass, mounted flush against the granite stone, freshly engraved. In honor of Staff Sergeant James Callahan, Ranger, Father, Leader, his legacy stands. And beneath it, enclosed in glass, the green beret, cleaned, preserved, and resting on black velvet, just as Ryan had left it. The following week, during cadet orientation, every recruit stood in front of that display. Not as a photo op, but as a lesson, a reminder. Something had shifted, not loudly, Not with banners or press releases, but in posture and presence, in the way people began to speak just a little softer when they passed the memorial. Ryan was no longer seated behind the white line. He now walked through the campus with his head high, not looking for approval, only forward. The same cadets who had mocked him now offered nods of respect, quiet, sincere. One even stepped aside for him in the dining hall without a word. Trevor Hensley never spoke to him again, but during the next roll call, he stood straighter than anyone. And when he passed the memorial, he removed his cap. The general didn't return for speeches or ceremonies, but his medal, the Distinguished Service Cross, remained with Ryan. He kept it in a velvet box his mother had once used for her wedding ring. It wasn't to show. It was to remember. One afternoon, Captain Mallory, the Academy's most rigid instructor, called Ryan into his office. No reprimand, no correction, just a printed letter, already signed. It was an official invitation to join the next cadet class, not as a guest, not as a legacy, as a candidate. Captain Mallory said nothing else. He simply handed over the letter and offered a firm nod, the kind that came from a soldier who understood the weight of silence. That evening, as taps played faintly across the campus and shadows lengthened across the parade field, Ryan sat near the memorial again. No cameras, no audience, just the names and the wind. He touched the edge of the display glass gently, where the boina rested. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. But his eyes held something they hadn't before, a quiet fire, steady, centered. As he stood to leave, someone nearby whispered, "He's the reason we all stood that day." Ryan didn't turn around. He just kept walking. But this time the path didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. If you typed honor earlier, thank you. If you subscribed, welcome. And if this story moved you in any way, remember this: we stand together, even in silence. See you in the next one.